This is The Real Deal, where real estate meets real life. Whether you're a seasoned real estate expert, a first-time home buyer, or if you're simply passionate about hearing small business stories, this is the podcast for you. Join us as we dive deep into the world of real estate and beyond.
Our sponsor today is Yvette Meyer with Old Republic Home Warranty. Reach out to Yvette for all your home warranty needs, whether you're buying a brand new home or a resale home. Getting a home warranty will ensure that your home is protected. Well, welcome to episode 58 of The Real Deal, where real estate meets real life. I'm your host, Janine Igliane, with my ever-famous co-host, Ryan Hatcher.
What's up, guys?
And we have a repeat guest today, one of our favorites, Ms. Heidi Neeley. Heidi's on our team. She's a rock star realtor, but Heidi also has a creativity bone, a major creative bone in her body. Yeah. And we're going to talk about that. But one of the things that I wanted to share before is what we do on our team, or what we've started doing, which I have found to be like so fun, is we're letting each team member take 10 to 15 minutes and teach a lesson to our team about anything, but whatever it is, something that they're passionate about, personally passionate about. And I can tell you, it has been so fun for me because every time somebody has shared, you just see them come alive with excitement because they really are passionate about it. And so your topic, which was so fun, and I learned a lot, I took a lot of notes, which is why which is why we wanted to have you on the podcast, because I think anybody listening could hear this and be inspired to go out and be creative. I had no idea all the benefits. So yeah. Heidi, all of that to say, thanks for being on the podcast and sharing this with us.
Yeah, it's fun to be here again today. Creativity is a huge part of my life. From the time I was little, that's just something that I've really enjoyed. And it's kind of, we give kids labels sometimes, good and bad. And that was a label that I was given early that I really felt good about and loved.
I love that you loved that.
Yeah.
And to that point, that is true, right? Because I know I say this and maybe I shouldn't, but I'll say I'm not a creative person, right? But is that the right thing to say? I don't know.
Right. Well, yeah. So for my little lesson where I was teaching you guys, I did a lot of research because obviously I feel passionate about it, but I wanted to have some data and things to back it up. And there is a lot of research that creativity it's like a muscle. So you may naturally have more or less of it, but it doesn't mean that you can never become more creative. And creativity really encompasses a lot of things. It's not just artistic talent. It's really just a way of thinking outside the box. And one of the quotes that I shared in our little class that I love is Albert Einstein. He said, creativity is intelligence having fun. So we can always practice creativity and get more of it. And it just benefits every part of your life. I mean, there's studies talking about how CEOs would rather have someone who's creative than even honest.
Yeah.
It ranks so highly because it makes people better problem solvers, better at their job.
Yeah. Let's talk about that if we can, sure. Some of the benefits, because that was something that was very surprising to me from your presentation, was all the benefits that come from sitting down and just having time to be creative. One of the things that you shared was just that it's very stress relieving. Mm-hmm. And I thought about that. And one of the things you talked about was getting into this flow state. Yeah. And I think about when because we've done some events on it on our team, as a team, where we've done painting. Mm-hmm. And I shared this, that, we'll all be chit-chatting and talking, and then it'll just get to a place where everybody's quiet because they're focused. They're in that flow state, right?
Yeah. And that flow state feels really good, right? You're getting this dump of endorphins and all these good, happy chemicals in your brain. And basically flow state is just that place where you are doing something that challenges you enough that it's engaging. You're not bored, but you're not overwhelmed. It's not too challenging. So your skill level and the challenge are kind of matched. And so it feels really, really good to just sit in that place.
Yeah.
And I thought it was so interesting too, that in flow, and I think if you've been in that state and someone describes it, you go, oh yeah, I've been in that.
Right.
Where it's called time dilation. So you're so focused that you lose track of time, right?
Yeah.
It feels like no time is passing, and then you look up and an hour, 2 hours has gone by because you're so engaged in what you're doing. It also turns off a lot of other parts of your brain. So like the self-critic, the part that doubts yourself, kind of quiets down. And it's just fascinating.
That's so interesting.
Yeah.
And that could be, I could see why like the stress relief would, right? Because you're not focusing on the problems of this world or this life or whatever. You're simply focusing on the task at hand, and you're accomplishing something as you're doing it. And just, I could see how that would just make you feel so good. And I relate to that for me, and I want to hear for you guys, because you're a creative person too, Ryan. Like I said, I put that label on myself that I'm not. And again, I don't know if that's bad or good or bad to say that, but for you, you're creative. Obviously you're creative. But for me, I think about, I used to scrapbook, and that was like so fun to put, you know, be creative on a page and see that, have like something tangible at the end of it. But you, tell me, what do you guys?
Well, just on that comment, I do think it's bad for you to say that because I think it's a limiting belief.
Oh,
now maybe your creativity is different than ours, right? But if you're scrapbooking, that to me is an art.
Yeah,
right.
And that's creativity.
Right.
So
okay.
I think you are, just in different ways. I was just thinking about this when we were going through this conversation. When I was a kid, I used to lay down in the grass and look up at the clouds, and instantly I could pick out what this cloud looked like so fast. And I've noticed, I don't know if you guys have, but as an adult, if I do it, it takes me a while sometimes.
Yeah.
And I really feel like going through school and just life and focusing on things that maybe I'm not able to use my creativity or creative talents, that it's kind of shut that down a bit, and it's made it to where it's not easy to pull up.
Yeah, for sure.
So I feel like the more that I use it, the more that it comes. And as a realtor, and in my previous career as an insurance guy, it was hard to be creative. It was hard to find ways to use those talents. So I would try to incorporate projects in like some of the events that we do.
Yeah.
I'll make something as a prop just because it's cool, and it's relevant with what we're doing.
So so to that point, Ryan, you're handy. So I would say like you're good with woodwork. What are some other, you like to draw?
Yeah. I mean, I was actually going to be an architect growing up.
Yeah.
And from the moment I recall.
You know what's funny? Ray thought the same thing
Really?
too. And he's a good artist.
Really? Yeah. I think it started watching the Brady Bunch.
Oh.
Because Mike Brady was an architect and had a sick office.
Isn't that one of the best shows, by the way? Total side note. I love
Old
that
school.
show.
And so but then as I got older, I'm like, I don't see myself drawing buildings. And there are different types of architecture, but ever since I can remember, sitting in church, coloring dinosaurs and drawing dinosaurs. And so it's always been a part of my life, and it runs in my family. So my aunt and my great grandmother were amazing painters and artists. And my mom and my grandma are interior designers. And so I got that gene, and it's been a struggle for me because I don't get to use the talents enough in our world of professional and being a dad. And, so I have to find ways. And so one way I do that is when we have like the trunk or treat, for example, that's coming up. To me, it's a competition. It may not be to anybody else, but I want to make it look cool and find creative ways to do a cool trunk. So
Tell us some of the ones you've done in the past.
Oh man. Well, last year we did Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse, and I made these big orange rings that were smaller progressively as you move back, and they were lit up with LED lights. So it looked like the Spider-Verse where they were traveling through it.
Yeah.
We did a pretty sick pirate ship one time.
Yeah.
That was cool, and turned our van into a giant pirate ship. It had a 22-foot mast.
Do you have any of that stuff?
I still have.
Because I still have to do a trunk or treat.
Yeah.
Janine's like, can I borrow it?
I actually have the pirate ship.
So maybe I'll do that.
Well, recently I redid the actual boat because Cammie needed it, and the other one had just been demolished in the weather.
Yeah.
But anyway,
We'll talk later.
Yeah. So this year is a secret, so I can't tell you yet.
Okay. So Heidi, you are, I don't know what you would call it, like a creative, what's that word? Like you can do a lot. So what are some of the things that you do?
Jill of all trades, maybe.
There we go. Sure.
So that's the thing is I love to dabble. It's not about any one area of creativity. It's just the practice of creativity. And I think, going back to what you said earlier about not being creative, I think sometimes we judge ourselves, am I creative, on the quality of our output, right? And young kids, when they are doing art, they don't look at their neighbor's paper and say, oh no, mine's not as good. When they're very young, they're just making art for the sake of making art and doing it their own way. And that really is like at the heart of creativity. It's just doing things in a unique way that's yours and that's not what everyone else is doing. So yeah, I just love to dabble. And I want to share a quick story about being very young and kind of getting that label that really impacted me. And it has nothing to do with artistic creativity. So when I was in about third grade, I was in this clogging group, which is basically tap dancing with a country twist.
I can see this. I can see you doing this.
It was great. It was great. It was the late 80s, big puffy skirts. It was fun.
Oh, wait, is there video of this?
No, sorry. But anyway, this group was run by my first grade teacher who I loved. I really loved and adored her. And she had done a good job at making me feel good at things, right? And I think we can all remember teachers like that, where they made you feel good about who you were and about your skills that you were good at. Anyway, so I really loved this teacher, and she had this clogging group, and I was doing it with her. And this, again, back in the 80s, she had a sleepover. And so all the clogging girls went over to her apartment, and we all brought our sleeping bags and had a sleepover. Her boyfriend was there. They were like the only two adults.
Funny.
I know. Now I'm
like,
that wouldn't fly today.
Right. Yeah.
But I remember this was probably, I probably had sleepovers with like friends down the street, but never like this far away from home, not with family members type thing. And in the morning, there was, my mom and dad weren't there to help me roll up my sleeping bag and pack up my stuff. And so I think, my teacher or somebody had helped me roll the sleeping bag, but I'm a pretty little girl at this point, and I have this big sleeping bag and my duffel bag and probably a pillow that I had to like get down the stairs of her apartment. And I remember I just had this idea, hey, what if I stick my arm through the middle of the sleeping bag? Then I can hold the duffel bag and then the pillow in my other arm. And I remember my teacher's boyfriend looked at me and he was like, "What? How are you doing that?" And he kind of had this moment where he's like, "Wow, that's a really good idea." Because otherwise my little arms would not have been able to hold all that stuff. And it was a moment where I was recognized for doing something different and novel. And he pointed it out like, that's really smart. That's really cool. It's creative of you.
Problem solving.
Yeah. So that was an early memory of just being rewarded for doing something novel. And through the years, I did clogging. That's somewhat creative.
Yeah.
I've done sewing. I do enjoy sewing and quilting.
You just went on a trip to do painting,
Yeah,
right?
I actually went. I picked up oil painting last year. That's kind of one of my newest things, and went with a friend down to Mexico. There's a city down there called San Miguel de Allende, and it's kind of like the Sedona of Mexico. It's a very cute, sort of high-end artistic town. And there were about a dozen of us painters just staying in the little villa and painting and
sounds like
walking the cobblestone
like
streets.
A movie or something.
It was
like
it was great. Dreamy. It was really, really fun. So yeah, I've picked up painting.
You crochet?
I don't crochet.
Don't crochet. Okay.
But and one of the reasons it interests me, but I'm left-handed, and that's another whole discussion on creativity.
Yes. We should talk about that exercise that you had us do.
Yeah. So in the class that I did for the team, one of the little exercises to start people sort of using different parts of their brain was to say, okay, write your name, and then now switch, and with your non-dominant hand, try writing your name again, because it just opens up different parts of your brain. And that's another thing I didn't really do research on, but I know there are a lot of really famous, successful people, whether it's in arts or other areas, that are left-handed. And my personal thought on that is, the world is mostly right-handed.
Yeah.
It's like there's only like 11% of the population that's left-handed, which is kind of odd, isn't it? You would think it would be like 50-50, but it's not. So the world is set up for right-handers.
Interesting.
And so from a young age, left-handers have to be creative.
Well,
How do I do this
writing,
thing?
Yeah.
Like with a pencil, you just smear it, right?
Right.
So my brother's a lefty, and he'd have to write like this to keep his hand out of the way.
Right-handers pull. You're pulling the ink. Left-handers have to push the ink.
Interesting.
And so just you're sort of forced from the beginning into this, I got to do things in a slightly different way. How can I approach that? So crochet, I haven't picked that up.
Okay.
I probably could, but it's a little tricky because people go to teach you and they realize you're left-handed, and then they go, oh boy, everything's mirror image of itself. How do I do this?
Yeah.
So
I just watched this video where this guy was talking about how to change your mindset. Mm-hmm. And he said, do these couple things. And one of them was brush your teeth with the opposite hand. Start doing it every day.
Yeah.
And you're going to see real quick how weird it is. Like it's funky.
And one of the things I think to that point and to all of this, when it comes to being creative, that is really powerful. Today, with everybody feeling anxious and depressed and all of that, taking the time to be creative is like an outlet.
Yeah.
It also helps you to focus on something. And that's why doing some of those exercises, right, where you're doing something, because we do so many things automatically, right? Brush our teeth, right? We just do the same, whatever, don't even have to think about it. So if you do something different like that, where now you have to think about it, or being creative, it gives you an opportunity to focus on something and not focus on all the other stuff that's weighing you down and stressing you out and all of that. So it's a stress release.
Yeah, for sure. And in that presentation, again, I read an article. There was a researcher, I'm not sure what type of scientist she was, but she did a research project on, depression and things. And her theory was that there's data that shows that doing things with your hands has a powerful effect on reducing things like anxiety and depression. And she's like, for however long humans have been on the earth, we've been doing things with our hands, but now we're moving into a society where we do less physically with our hands. And so
we do a lot of this. Yeah,
our brains aren't set up for that. So to just stop and do something with your hands, right? Yeah. Adult coloring, crochet, cooking, anything. Yeah. Stop and do things with your hands. It benefits your brain.
Well, and that's part of the reason why I do some of these projects just for fun, as I'll go in my garage and just do some woodworking or something and listen to an audiobook for hours. Yeah. And it is so therapeutic. I love it. Yeah. I don't do it enough.
Even just things like, I also like cooking. Yeah. The act of like kneading bread, just taking 10 minutes, turning off your brain, using your hands. And
that's absolutely a creative thing too.
Oh yeah. For sure. Cooking. Oh yeah. It's an art.
Well, I said this when we had our meeting about this. I believe that we were born to create. Yeah. And there's something about us creating things besides families and life, and but designing and creating is part of our spiritual nature. Yeah, it's an inherent part of who we are, built into our spiritual DNA is to create and to do things. One interesting point that I'll share about creativity to give people hope out there, right? Because there's a lot of people who I think say, I'm not very creative. In 2019, the BBC did a study with 50,000 people, and they explored how creative activities can help you manage your mood and boost well-being. And the research found that trying a new creative activity is really good for our emotions and our well-being. And this study, one of the interesting things that it revealed was that skill level didn't matter, right? It wasn't about how well you do something. It was just the act of doing it, especially if it's something novel and new. And we get emotional benefits even from a single session of practicing something creative. So we can let go of the,
pressure to be perfect.
Yes.
Just to do it.
I love that because it triggered a memory. When my kids were little, we would, get all the recycling boxes and we would just basically make stuff.
Oh yeah.
And I remember I still have a picture of it. We made a giant bunny rabbit out of boxes because it was Easter time. Yeah. And they were probably 4, 5, 6, and they got such a kick out of it.
That's so fun.
But we did it. We continued to do that every year for their Valentine's Day boxes. Like find really cool creative ways. Yeah. So that's one of my proud moments as a dad is to look back at all these different boxes that I ended up making most of them, but mostly, but it was so fun.
Yeah.
And they loved it. And they were so excited to take that to school. Like I remember we did a giant stegosaurus. And then the same year, so that was Braden's, and Cammie's was TIE Fighter. So Star Wars,
cool.
and it was actually a 2-piece thing. And it was huge anyway.
Wow.
But yeah, so.
That's cool.
Yeah.
I think it's important to get your kids thinking that way too.
Yeah,
so
for sure.
Yeah.
in those little projects.
For sure. And I think learning from our children too. So I'll share another study with you guys because this was so fascinating to me. It was a study of 1,600 children. And I believe this was done, decades ago. But anyway, they gave these kids a task and then kind of gauged how creative they could be in solving this problem, right? At age 5, 98% of the kids tested scored at a genius level of creativity.
Wow.
Same kids at age 10, given a similar problem to solve, at age 10, only 30% of kids were at genius level of creativity. But wait, it gets worse, Ryan. It gets worse. Age 15, only 12%. And then in a separate but similar study, only 2% of adults rank at genius levels of creativity.
Wow.
So I feel like we need to learn from our kids. It's involving our kids in that, but also, especially from very young children, learning to be more like them.
So what's happening that's causing that decrease in creativity? I think it's school. I really do. I think it's the school system.
It could be. I think also just like Janine was saying, routine, right? We get older and we've done things enough times that we sort of go for the easiest, most common thing that we do every time, and we stop abandoning sort of trying things a whole different way, right?
Well, and you talked about this earlier, the freedom when you're a kid versus when you're an adult, right? You are maybe
you're not afraid to fail.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Right. The stakes are low. When you're 3, you can put on your t-shirt any which way and it doesn't matter. But if you show up to work at 40 with your t-shirt on weird, that could have implications for your job.
Yeah.
But we lose some of that inhibition. But I think that's why it's such a sought after quality for CEOs and employers, because we need to think of new ways to do things, right? In order to be the very best real estate agent, I don't want to be like every other agent, or I'm going to be part of the white noise, right? And so
I love that.
we can't wear our shoes inside out or our underwear on our outside of our clothes, but we can still maintain a little bit of like that childlike quality of like, how can I be different? How can I try this different?
And I think in today's world, that's what will set you apart, is those that are able to step outside of the traditional box and do something different, put their spin on it, their flair on it, their unique touch on it. And that's what will set them apart for sure. So there's nothing wrong with copying, but don't be afraid to add your flair to it as well, especially when it comes to creativity.
Right. And a lot of studies on success talk about, it's a tolerance for failure, which I think is hand in hand with this idea of creativity. Creativity is being unafraid of failing and doing something that other people will say, that's not how you do it. And success is very much the same thing, right? I'm going to fail, but I'm going to keep trying and doing it different. And I don't care.
I know. I love that.
Yeah.
I was just talking to my kids about that. Like, I think one of the biggest keys to success is not being afraid to fail, to be okay to put yourself out there and be like, this may not work, but I will learn from it and be better next time. That's huge.
Yeah. And I'll say that in my life, in the areas where I've really just said, I'm going to swing for the fences and do something really different than the way other people have done it, there is so much satisfaction on the other side of that. Because if you play small and you try to just follow the crowd because you're afraid of failure, you're never going to know that joy of like just being like, that turned out amazing. And everyone around you, of course, when it's successful, everyone around you is like, wow, that was amazing. But what they didn't see is the risk that you take in stepping outside and doing it different.
Totally.
What's the name of the lady that invented shapewear? Spanx?
Spanx?
Yeah.
Oh,
Jesse Eisler's her husband. I can't remember her name.
I can't think
Well,
of it, but yeah.
she attributes a lot of her success and being able to become a billionaire to her dad when she was young. When they would sit around the dinner table, he would ask them, "What did you fail at today?"
Yeah.
And he would give them a high five, and it became a common thing. I love that.
I love that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because
exactly.
I think, I mean, that this is one of my favorite quotes. Fear, and you can replace it with doubt, kills more dreams than failure ever will.
For sure.
And that is what holds most people back from their dreams.
100%.
Yeah. Yep.
So conquer your fear.
Yeah.
That's
Do
right.
it, do it anyway.
Do it anyway.
And be creative while you do it.
Yeah.
So much more fun that way.
Yeah. What else you got, Heidi? Because
else
you
do
had
I
some
have?
good stuff.
I have some fun quotes. I love, there were just so many fun quotes about creativity. So here's one from Maya Angelou. You can't use up creativity. The more you use, the more you have.
Oh.
Yeah.
That too.
So I love that.
I think it's true.
Yep. And then another great one. This is Ursula Le Guin. She says, the creative adult is the child who survived. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. This world kills kids a little bit. Here's some interesting ways that you can boost creativity.
Love it.
Embrace boredom. That's a soapbox that I could get onto.
Put your phone down.
Totally.
Well, and I think we are really doing our kids a disservice in this world to keep them entertained at every
Right.
moment. And even ourselves, right?
Oh, for sure.
We are stunting ourselves by always having on our phones colorful lights, sounds. I mean, those are all like brain rewards, but the problem is
You don't have to do
creativity
anything.
comes when your mind just has nothing else to do but wander.
100%.
And so letting your kids be bored, letting yourself be bored, removing some of those stimulations that keep you distracted is a great way to.
I love that. You know, speaking of that, like one of my issues is I'm constantly feeding my brain, whether it's like listening to a podcast or Audible or something, whatever. I feel like I'm constantly doing that, and I have to be intentional with turning it off and
Yes.
being in silence.
Yes.
And it's sometimes a little hard because I'm so used to that. But then when I'm able to sit, that's when those thoughts come, right? And that's when some great ideas can come.
I totally relate because I'm almost obsessed with being productive that I do not have silent time enough. And I remember in college, there was a friend of mine had a friend, and I was so impressed because she would spend 30 minutes a day in some quiet place and do nothing. She would just sit there and she would have a journal, I think. And that's so important even today, like more so today.
Well, and even to get kind of spiritual, I think sometimes in our prayer life, we're so busy talking to God that we're not
Don't listen for
listening.
answers.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
And that's huge too.
Yes.
So,
When do you hear if you're always talking?
Right.
Yeah.
That's often when the answers come.
right?
So I'm going to out my husband, Ken, here. There was several years where he would get out of the shower every morning and be like, oh my gosh, I get my best ideas in the shower. And I mean, that's silly. And I know he's not alone. I've heard since
yeah,
a
I've
lot
heard
of
too.
people, well, why do you think that is? It's one of the few places in this world now where there's not a screen in front of you or someone talking to you.
Right.
It's just you and your thoughts.
right? Right?
So, yeah.
Well, and I think, and it's so funny because for some reason lately, I've been seeing several people say that they're waking up like 2 or 3 in the morning with all these ideas in their head. And I know I'm guilty of that. 3 in the morning and I'll just be going, right? I think part of that is because we're not giving ourselves time throughout the day to have those thoughts that our mind is like, I need to get this out. I need to process. I need to think about this. So making sure that we're intentional with those times, not that it's bad to listen to podcasts and do all of that stuff, but like every time, sometimes drive in your car with silence.
Yeah.
Sometimes go for a walk and don't take your phone.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, for
Well,
sure.
I remember when I was still in corporate America and I would drive 45 minutes to work. I heard somebody say the radio is like chewing gum for your mind. And I thought, what am I spending my time doing? What am I,
Right.
and I love music, right?
Right.
So that was important to me, but I kind of switched gears and started listening to valuable things. So use it as what I've heard people say, drive time university. And how much further can you advance yourself by doing that? But then you need the silent time too.
Yeah. Yeah. Yep, for sure. Okay, you ready for some more ideas
Yes.
on how to be more creative?
Yes.
Change your environment, right? If you're trying to be creative in a task you're doing, like maybe it's at work and you're sitting at your desk and you're feeling stumped, go for a walk, or, take your laptop to the library, go somewhere different. And then that can sometimes stimulate your brain to be like, okay, maybe there's different ways to think about things.
Love that. You had us get up and switch our usual seats
Yes.
at our table.
Yes, because even that,
weird.
we become very routine in even the place at the table that we sit. So just by mixing that up, you're like, interesting.
Different
I've never sat on this side of the room.
Yeah.
And it just opens up your brain. Another one is to do something unconventional. I think that goes back to what you're saying, like brush your teeth with a different hand. Just do things differently, right? I eat dinner without utensils, right? Have you ever done that where you do like the spaghetti dinner? Oh yeah.
A spaghetti dinner, Heidi.
Oh yeah. This is like a church youth group idea, right? They would take like clean, plastic tablecloths and like put the spaghetti like right there. Or a lady at our church did like a nacho bar and it was like right on the table, right?
That's cool.
And kids love that because they're all about that. Why do I need a plate?
Yeah.
But as adults, we go,
Right.
I'm going to need a bib for that spaghetti.
For sure. Oh my goodness.
Yeah, but just do something unconventional. Limit your resources. So that's an interesting one that I practiced one time when I was painting. I was taking this online class and the teacher was sort of teaching some color theory and mixing colors. And so I had done some of that. And then I had on my palette just some leftover paint. And her little homework assignment for this class was, okay, now that you've mixed some colors, try making a little small painting. And I was kind of running out of time and I didn't want to mix more paint. But I also didn't want to waste the expensive oil paint I had mixed. So I thought, okay, I'll just make what I can with just what's on my palette. And interestingly enough, sometimes I'll share what I paint online. I got so much good feedback from that painting.
Yeah.
And so, sometimes giving yourself limits to say, okay, what can I do with only these resources?
Yeah, I love that.
Can open up creativity. Writing by hand.
Yes.
That's another one that we're getting away from a lot.
That's so important. Yeah.
Yeah. Again, that connection between your hands and your brain is hardwired into us.
This lady right here takes more notes than anybody I've ever seen.
I'm faithful with it. And it helps me. They say, right, that you'll learn faster that way than just hearing. But if you actually write down, it helps make that connection better, more clear. I love that.
Yeah.
And they also say, and I forget what book this is in, but college students that write down their goals are like significantly more apt to achieve those goals than the ones that don't. And that was the only difference, those that wrote it down versus those that didn't. How easy is that, you guys?
Yeah.
If you want to be more successful, write it down.
Yeah.
I think
Done.
a goal unwritten is merely a wish.
Right. Right. The other thing that I've heard about writing things down is quieting your mind. So when you do wake up at 2 a.m, the act of putting it on paper helps your brain to say, okay, it's safely stored. So I don't have to keep ruminating on this thought. I can just know that it's stored. And so it allows your brain to clear out the clutter.
Totally. Yeah. Love that.
Yeah. Let's see. Collaborate with someone from a different field. So that's one that I haven't done a lot of, but it's an interesting idea, right? To step into someone else's world and see how
they do it.
You might implement something that they're doing.
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah. Take a break and engage in physical activity.
Yes.
I think that's a good one.
Yeah.
Tony Robbins says something like that, move your body to shift your state.
I love
your
that.
emotions.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Movement is powerful. I was talking to somebody recently about panic attacks, and I had heard that a panic attack is your body's way of physically releasing the stress that's inside, right? Because it has to get out some way. Well, another way that you can achieve the same thing is through exercise. Yeah. And we're so sedentary in our lives today because everything comes back to technology, and we're not out building with our hands and being creative that way, that we have to be more intentional about those things. And I think the more that we can get outdoors, move our body, go for walks, all of that, the better that will be for so many reasons.
Yeah. Dr. Amen is a world-renowned brain doctor, and I heard him speak at a conference one time, and he said that if you can pull yourself out of the deepest, darkest depression by doing one thing, go on a 45-minute walk, brisk walk, as if you're trying to get somewhere quickly, 3 times a week. That's pretty impressive. Just walking.
Mm-hmm. So. Yep, for sure. It's very powerful. All right.
Anything else you want to share?
I think that's most of what I had. I just hope that people get the message that creativity is doable for anybody, right? And there's a million ways to do it. And again, there's no wrong way to do it. Just trying something new will benefit your life in a lot of ways.
I love it. I love it because I think it is something that's lost that we forget about. You know, we don't think we don't put importance on it. Yeah. But there's so much benefit that can come from it. That was one of the things that I got from your talk, was just all the benefits and things I think that we know, but just to hear it again, it was like, oh yeah, I do get that, or I do see that. So it made me inspired to want to go out and have more opportunities to be creative.
So what are you going to do, Janine? What's your creative outlet going to be?
I know. I don't know.
So it inspired me to kind of slow down and use my artistic talents more. So just the other day I posted on my stories, we were coloring Halloween things. And it was so cool to just sit there and color, not even draw, just color for like 30 minutes. So I'm going to do more of that.
I love that. One of the ideas that you had that I am going to do, or you had shared, not an idea, something you had done as a family, was you all as a family painted the same image.
Yeah.
And so you put the image up on the TV, and then everyone had to paint it the same thing, but with their own interpretation of that, or flair, whatever you want to call it. I think that would be so fun.
Yeah. That's been a family favorite. We've done it a couple times and I love it. And the first time we did it, it was just a picture of a parrot that my husband found on Google. And so we just put it up on the TV and everyone's painting the same parrot. And at that time, my youngest son was probably 6 or 7. I mean, he wasn't that old. And then all the way up to my older kids were teenagers, and my oldest daughter's very creative. So of course her parrot looks amazing. But at the end, when we're sharing everyone's work, unanimously, everyone's favorite parrot was my youngest son.
Oh, I love that.
And I think it was because it had so much personality. Yeah. I mean, it didn't have as much detail, but it was almost like a cartoon. It was just so sweet and so cute. Yeah.
That's
cool.
And then also one other thought about doing that as a family is I think that also builds resilience and grit in kids, because if you're not a painter, to sit down and force yourself to do it, to not give up, and then to be vulnerable and share it with your family, there's a little bit of discomfort in that. I mean, I've even talked to professional artists who talk about the messy middle, right? And even successful, accomplished artists hit a point where they say, this is crap. It doesn't look good. Yeah. But they've learned, keep going. And when you keep going, it will come together. And if it doesn't, there's always another canvas you can paint, but that's another skill that it just builds in our kids this is a low stakes way for us to practice being okay with discomfort.
Yes, I love that. I love that. Well, Heidi, thanks for sharing all of this. And I hope that our listeners are just as inspired as I know I was when I left your talk, and just reminded of the importance of creativity, because I think it's something that we just don't do enough of. So thanks, Heidi.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Awesome.
I've been happy to share. It's fun.
And if you enjoyed this episode, we would love it if you would like and subscribe, and maybe even drop a comment and tell us what your next creative project is going to be.
That's right.
Thanks for listening.
Thanks for listening to The Real Deal, where real estate meets real life. Make sure to follow or subscribe to the Home Selling Team on YouTube, Instagram, and Spotify to stay up to date with our podcast.